Welcome to our year-end episode where Nick and Norbert discuss the importance of data collection at Origin and why digitizing data at Origin is so important. We hope you enjoy our stories and chat over a topic that is extremely important to us. Happy New Year.
I mean, it makes sense for me to talk about this because I've kind of here and there at different events been kind of like talking about it and some lectures and speaking to more industry professionals about it and like, visiting Origin more this year and really learning about like where the barriers are, where the challenges are, where the opportunities are. And I don't know, the more I go and the more I learn, it's like I realize there's a lot of opportunity, but still a lot of like gaps that not just like us as Cropster can fill, but like the industry should focus on more to fill. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. You wanna start with that a little bit and like lead in on your experiences from this year, what you have talked about, and then we can maybe tap into that and yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, I feel like throughout the whole supply chain, there's different types of businesses. There's the roasters, there's the cafes, there's the importers, there's mills, there's producers. And historically, from what I've learned, is like here on this side of the supply chain, the consuming end, there's a little bit more business know-how nor business knowledge. And a part of that is like collecting basic data points to analyze, see if you have a profitable or a sustainable business or if your business is working or not. And like a part of that is data, like basic business data collection. And one thing I learned is like at Origin, that's not necessarily the case for producers, for example. A lot of times I learned that producers, they probably live on their farm and they see their cash crop is a way to get cash, go into town, get their groceries for the week, and hope that the following week they can have another production to sell and then get their cash again. And I've learned that like, that's somewhat worked for people for a long time, but it's also not been the most empowering or sustainable way of going about their livelihood on a farm, And I learned that like with that mentality that's been created, like, or that's been kind of in there is, there's not really a need or a mentality or necessity to kind of realize, oh, I should probably like really understand and see my farm as a business and collect these different data points of like, am I actually making enough money or am I losing money?
Yeah.
And that's kind of one thing I've started learning this year. And I kind of broke it down into two, in my head, two different, like two overarching topics of like data collection at Origin. That's like cost of production and quality data collection, like the actual like fermentation recipes and the processing methods and analyzing those different like data points. And two very different data points to be collecting, but in a way they still kind of go together. And I think there's more people in the industry now trying to like understand that and help producers understand that, but I feel like there's still kind of like a long way to go.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I agree. I think about that also quite a bit, and I've been, of course, in the field, and my thought is, if what you just described is not only a farmer's reality, but is also a reality for many people and for some businesses all over the world. And it's usually businesses who are owned by one person or one family who don't define themselves as a business. So they do business activities, they participate in business, but they don't see them as a company. So they are structured differently. I would say just think of your personal budget, right? Do you think of Nick as an enterprise? You could, and that means, well, you do your personal budget, you do the checks and balances, and you would know where and how you spend your money, what you're purchasing, and how you're growing or not. And that's just one example, right? And the farmers are very similar to that. A lot just don't do it. They live of the land and from day to day, and they spend. If there's money, they spend it. If there's no money, they can't spend it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so. It is it is a systematic shift into a business mindset, I would say.
Mm.
You, mhm,
Yeah, I would agree, but I would also say too that like I feel like here, and I can only speak from like the States, I can't speak for other countries, obviously, but
mhm,
I feel like here in the States, it's a little bit different because we kind of have like a legal structure to kind of what's the right word? Like for example, if I own my farm, or
mhm,
let's just say I don't even know my farm. Let's say I provide a service like a digital service, like an advertising service, and I'm a solo entrepreneur. Like there's a legal structure in place for like the government to support you in how you go about like what your income looks like, how much you pay in taxes, and like there's a system in place to kind of for people to kind of understand and see themselves as like a business, like if that
mhm.
makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Where like I don't know what it's like in Colombia, but like if I was a farmer in Colombia and like I was making dollars and I could take that kind of same mentality to like as like a solo entrepreneur, then yeah, then I would understand that can also be my livelihood can be my business, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that makes total sense, and I think so. Your point is well taken. Certain like government structures can help,
mhm,
but also, of course, impose certain um, steps so that you have to train yourself a little bit. You have to inform yourself. Um, I'm not 100% sure if they would really help you in understanding your business better, but at
mm,
least a year later or half a year later if you made money or if you lost money. So that could
mm,
also be, and that's the big tax surprise for some people. They you don't pay taxes for a long time or for the whole year,
mhm,
spend all their money. Suddenly they have to hand in the paperwork. Oh, and then you see that you have to pay taxes because yeah, actually there was a profit,
mhm, mhm,
and then the money's not there. So now it creates a cash flow problem. So I think it's always about the mindset and about the preparation, how you go into a business.
mm,
And I think that is that step of hey, I'm not just a person participating in business activities, but I am actually a business, and I want to structure myself as a business,
mm,
even if it's a sole proprietor or if it like a farmer, or even if the government requires or not for me to do that. I
mhm.
mean, Colombia is not that much different, right? It's just the informal sector is much bigger.
Ah,
But
yeah,
ultimately, if you're a business or if you're participate in business activities, you also would have to file taxes and
yeah,
register and all those.
yeah,
Um, Question is, do everybody do that? So.
yeah, yeah. That's true. So, so let's go. Okay, so let's go back a little bit. Because I want to know. We touched on this in like the first few episodes and the episodes with the founders, but when if we go back in time a little bit, when you first started Cropster, when you were living in Colombia, what were some of the challenges that you saw at the time, um, that were maybe barriers or made it difficult to for not just the producer to like collect their data, but for them to understand that they need to collect their data? Because that's one thing I learned still to this day is that like I feel like there's still not an understanding to see a need to collect
Yeah.
data.
Uh, Absolutely. That has not, it has changed a little bit, but it's still an ongoing process. So that's why I was so like, I think it's this shift in mindset first. So
Mm,
you know that you're participating in business activities. So that also means you have to collect certain data sets. Collecting data is usually not fun if it happens automatically. And I think that's where cell phone comes in, our location, temperature, um, I don't know. So many whatever the sensors in our phone can automatically capture is
mhm,
captured by some companies. Not necessarily always accessible to you, but now you just walk around with your phone in your pocket, and at the end of the day, the phone tells you how many steps and what you have done during the day, right? That would be super cumbersome, counting your steps with a step counter and then entering it to an Excel sheet, and then calculate your flight of stairs, you go up and down, and all those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can be very cumbersome or require special equipment or just a phone. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, and so that's basically automatic data collection.
Okay.
And then once the data is there, in this case, your phone gives you an interface to make that data accessible and somehow exciting. So there's several steps. One is just you look at it because you're interested. And the next
Mm-hmm.
step is the phone tells you, hey, you still have 4 hours. Why don't you want to get out there and get this extra 1,000 steps in? So there's an call to action. There's someone basically telling you, an algorithm, do something to
Mm-hmm.
achieve your goals.
Mm-hmm.
So related to farmers, what is that? Well, that could be weather sensors that would be measuring production when it happens. That means whenever you spend money. Another great example, like spending money and putting that on a ledger is boring. Nobody wants
Mm-hmm.
to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I was always interested in my personal finances, so I did that for a while. But it's you have to do it every day. You have to sit down every day and put down what you have spent. So, well, I grew up still in a cash world, so there you have to do that, and then or collect receipts, but also like there's not always receipts,
Mm-hmm.
especially on personal purchases. So fast forward, living in the US and spending 99.5% of my expenses on a credit card. This is beautiful because everything is locked automatically. All I need to do is log on to my credit card, download the data in a format, and make sense of it, or import it into an accounting system, or it's already automatically linked to an accounting system.
Mm-hmm.
So, so those are the things, right? As long as we don't have a certain digital infrastructure in place at origin. So let's go back to the farmer when they spend money, when they pay their workers, when they buy seeds, when they buy fertilizer, when so, all those things are usually cash transactions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if they don't put them down on a sheet or in an app, ideally right away, at the moment when they do the transaction, it is likely to never happen.
Yeah. That's true.
And that's so that's a mindset and it's a habit. And forming habits
Mm.
is, well, it's totally doable. There's a lot of literature on how to do that and training programs and and all those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it habits are not built usually, well, bad habits are built automatically. But
Yes.
good or cumbersome habits, like especially habits or where the outcome is in the future,
Mm.
right? Whereas, well, in 6 months I will give you a data, or in 2 years you will know about your general profitability. Like, I have to do something every day, 5 times a day, whenever I spend money, to maybe in half a year, or 2 years, know about something I'm not 100% sure if I really am interested. That's a big ask, right? So
Yeah.
you need to have a vision for that.
Yeah. 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 That's true. You have to have a goal, I guess, like an interest in that goal and
Absolutely.
that final in that end. That you have to have an interest in the end to do the means.
And I think that's where education comes in, right? So
Yeah.
someone telling you, you go into a classroom, you go into the training program, and they tell you, hey, this is how the concept works. And then you buy into a concept of logging your information. You buy into a concept of, if you log those 3 data points, at some point you will get this and that result.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's a lot of young farmers who take part in those training programs um, are much more informed now.
Yeah.
And well, as you talked with Lucas in one of our podcasts, right? So he is doing those training programs to make it visible to farmers how important um, all different areas of education and training are.
Yeah. 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 And like one, I mean, because obviously, one thing I want to say that on touching on like the cash, what you were mentioning earlier, the cash and like credit card kind of culture. And we could talk a lot about on that. But one thing I want to say is like, I feel like that's also in some ways systemic in the way why, and more so than cultural as well, but systemic in the sense that like here in the States, we have a system where it's just a financial system where it's just so easy to use credit card everywhere, no matter where you go. But in places
Mhm.
like Colombia or other origin, it's like it's still very much the system is still set up to be very cash driven.
Mhm.
And
Sure.
that it's in some ways very problematic, in a lot of ways very problematic, because not only like, yeah, things are not logged automatically no matter what you purchase, but also too, it's limiting because from what I've learned is like, big companies, when they're buying coffee, they can't work off of a cash basis. There has to be some means of like having bank accounts set up and having some sort of like ledger and being able to track purchases and sales. And if you're a small farmer just kind of looking to sell your coffee and get some cash for the groceries, it's like you're not going to have that opportunity in a way to kind of meet those, like kind of grow and see the kind of that you could sell your coffee more than just to the local coyote or whatever it is.
Right.
But like the system is not set up in a way where the like big companies can go to small farmers, because it's unfortunately just doesn't work out.
Enjoying this episode of the Coffee and Technology Podcast? This podcast would not be possible without the support of Cropster. Whether it's tracking harvest yields, roastery and inventory management, or simply tracking brew recipes, Cropster Origin, Cropster Roast, and Cropster Cafe can help you streamline your workflows and help you operate more efficiently.
And that's another disadvantage. I think there's a lot of movement in the fintech world to serve those smaller entities in general, or people who are unbanked. So,
Mm,
and that's an ongoing process for 20 years now, to like mobile payments, text message based payments is one of the first ones. It's quite interesting that I haven't seen a lot of adaptation of those systems in Colombia, but I think it's also a regulatory um, problem a little bit there. And yeah, transfer money transfer is still complex, especially there. But you look into Africa or Asia,
mhm,
um, especially like in Kenya, we see the M-Pesa, for example,
mhm.
uh, which is super easy to transfer from one phone to another one, just a second, even internationally. So
Wow.
like in Central Africa, that M-Pesa is going cross border. Though I think those are the solutions for money transactions, right?
Mm,
And once that base system is set up, a lot more derivative services can come in.
mhm, mm. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
I really brought up the example of how we deal with money and how we account for it, because a lot of people can relate to it.
Mhm.
Everybody spends money. We all know how those systems work or not, and then we all sometimes would wish we would know where our money went. I mean, just last week, I was in disbelief. I really thought I usually have a very good control on my credit card. And it's like, well, I should probably be like maybe $300. And it's like, no, it's 1,200. It's like, that's why, right? And there was not one big transaction there. So I really went back and it's like, what is going on? It's all good. It's all legit.
Yeah,
But even it happens to me too, where I'm
yeah,
not fully aware of my spending patterns.
yeah. I can totally speak to that.
Yeah. Well, I
25
try
years old.
and then yeah.
Yeah, I'm with it. I'm the same way. I'm like, oh, I only spent $100 this week. All of a sudden, it's over a grand. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on?
Right, right. Well, at least we have the benefit, and now, so back to our example, right? We have the
Yeah,
benefit of looking it up. So we
yeah.
go back, and then we can analyze and see what has happened. And I think that's really the point here for the farmers and for everybody who is in business in one or the other areas, to be able to go back and understand what has happened So they can either replicate that outcome and say, yeah, I mean, I love going crazy in my spending pattern and not knowing what's going on because I like the thrill of getting a high credit card bill.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody says that, but that you could say that, or you go back and say, yeah, I should really like change my spending pattern in one or the other areas, and be more mindful, especially for maybe the next month or two. And
Yeah.
that's what farmers could do too. Just imagine, and let's go back. Let's leave a little bit that financial example.
Yeah.
Same with processing methods. Same with harvest data.
Mm-hmm.
Same with planting, or in general agronomic management of their plants. Like
Yeah.
if they always know exactly when was the last pruning, when was the last fertilization happening, how much was fertilized, what was the rain or weather pattern over that last growing period, and then be able to draw conclusions and change some of those patterns. So I mean, I have a very good friend in the fertilizer industry, or in fertilizer research more than anything, and he said so much fertilizer could be saved, which would be so good on the farmers' expenses, but also so good on the environment, and production would even go up. So
Mm.
over-fertilization, for example, is also a problem. Same as
Mm-hmm.
under-fertilization also damages the production systems. So I think that sweet spot, right, is always the question.
Yeah. But you can't
So
know that if you're not collecting any data. If you're not collecting.
exactly. And it's so frustrating, right? You
Yeah.
always you always work off your mind. And as I just made a point, right? I thought in my mind I'm spending my money in the right way. And then, well, here I go, look at the data, and it doesn't it I betray myself, right?
Yeah.
Or I don't know what's going on. I don't consider, I mean, I consider myself an average smart person. My brain works okay. I should know, right? And
Yeah.
that's what we always think. So like, oh, I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we look at the data and we just don't.
Yeah. But I think it goes back to like that kind of basic concept, and we talked about it in episodes as well with like Scott Rao and Rob Hoos. But like it goes back to this concept of like balancing data and beliefs, where it's like what you might think and feel to be right and true, like anecdotally,
Mhm.
may not always line up with what the facts are and what the data says. So it's like,
No,
how do you balance like what you know, but also what's actually really happening, what the numbers are saying.
yeah.
But
And
that's
that is the hardest. I mean, let's bring it back home. That is the hardest for us as a software company too. What How our users use the software, what is
mm,
the features they really need and want and use, and what is the features maybe not so much, um, and all those things you can learn from data. And when you start building a system, you don't know. In the beginning, you don't know. All you have is anecdotal data of going out there doing in the best case structured interviews. So yes, you can put down at least some information on a piece of paper, but the data quantity is really low.
mm,
So you don't, I mean, you have a hunch and you go in a direction. And then you can start measuring. Same like with website stats, right? Or with social media engagement and all those fun things.
mm-hmm,
You got to start somewhere and then kind of build, learn, decide, change, and adapt. And it's like so that's always that cycle of improvements.
yeah,
And basing that cycle on data, in my opinion, is especially in this data age, a very, very good idea.
yeah, 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 that's true. So I want to focus on this really quick. So we're making the case of why data collection is important, especially at origin. It's very, I mean, to me it seems pretty clear. But I want to pose the question to you as to like why why we should care on this end of the supply chain. And I say that because I
Hmm.
feel like, we're making the case to let's say we're making the case to producers, and every time I talk to producers, there's like a willingness to like, oh yeah, the willingness to like receive the help, understand and listen, like what we have to say. But I feel like there could also be the misconception, I want to say on our end, that like, hey, why are these guys in, or these people in like a Western country on this side of the supply chain making the case of like why someone else just should be collecting their data on that end of the supply chain. So like why should we care? Like why should people on this end care about why, Origin should be collecting more data? Like what's the benefit and the value for us as well? Because obviously benefit and value for them,
Yeah.
but
So
what is it?
so
Does that make sense?
let me start with with another question. Why should I care about the Amazon and if it's deforested or not?
Because I won't be able
Living
to breathe.
yeah, living in Northern California and thousands of miles away from it, right?
Yeah.
Well, because everything is connected, and because it's November and I have to scrap my car in the morning because it's colder than it's used to be, and so that's how we see that, right? So climate change is real, and all those phenomena. It everything is connected.
Mm-hmm.
And the supply chain of coffee is very very long, very complex, very distributed, and I think that's why really everybody should always care. If your supply chain is closer, it's a little bit easier to care or to have the visibility. Now, if the supply chain is not as immediate or accessible as it's in coffee, um, then we just need better systems to kind of bridge those gaps. So that's a kind of the way of saying, well, the everybody has a responsibility and also everybody has an interest. The coffee buyer will only be able to buy coffee if coffee exists.
Mm-hmm.
And the specialty coffee buyer with a very specific flavor profile we will only be able to do that if those farmers exist who can provide that very specific service.
Mm.
So I'm not saying coffee will go away and all will go totally totally away. I think that's not what's going to happen. But will that type of coffee we have known will that be there in the future?
Mm.
So, and I think that's why it's so important that prices are paid to support those systems. The correct marketing is in place uh, to transport the value of that product, and also the correct systems are in place to manage the quality.
Yeah.
I bring that back over and over, right? So look at it. The farmer works really really hard. You have seen the farms. We've been there, doing all the processing, doing all the extra care. All this takes basically the beans 15 times into their own hands, and then it's exported and sorted and again put on a with heavy involvement of people working their backs off, getting the coffee on the ship, massive efforts of shipping lines and energy consumption. Suddenly it all arrives at a roastery, and the roasting process. If we do not take care of that product every single step, it is so easy to lose it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe you don't lose it in terms of you have to throw it away, but you might lose it into a subpar product, which is not justifying all the previous steps being done with such great care and with such great energy.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny you say that because like it makes me think of like the cafe barista side. Like I feel like even on their end, basic like data collection on like consistency on pulling shots. It's like,
Yeah.
this coffee goes through months and months of processing and moving and roasting and manufacturing and different hands, all for like all this crazy hard and complex work, all for it to get to the cafe, just for, and I'm not saying it's the barista's fault or the cafe's fault, but all for maybe someone who just doesn't understand or know to pull a bad shot, and there goes that experience of that coffee. And like
Right.
I feel like those things can be managed like, with basic data collection, like of like how are we pulling shots in the cafe, who's pulling the shot, how can we improve training, how can we improve more awareness of like how to keep that care going up until when we serve it to the customer. because
Right.
it's yeah.
Right, and I think that's the decommoditization of a product. So it's not just coffee, which is just a brown liquid coming out of a machine,
Hmm.
and whatever happened before, who cares? Wherever it comes from, I don't know. And whoever was involved is like, yeah, I guess it's their business, right? So if you can always put it that way, but it doesn't really create a special or especially appealing product.
Mm.
It's something you can live with and you kind of take in as granted, and and there's also a place for that. So I'm not also not saying that heavy. I mean, it's not always possible. I'm sitting here, I'm using all this great technology, and I could be just sitting here in awe. And it's like, oh my god, the computer company did really a fantastic job with all the and they did, right? So they all take great care in every step so that we can record this episode.
Yeah.
um and the internet is working and there's people out there, and I'm always noticing them when it's not right. I call them angry and tell them what's going on, but ultimately 99% of the time or more, it just works beautifully.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that view on life, or that view on whatever we consume and whatever we do, um comes from somewhere. Someone takes pride in, or puts extra energy. That is something I'm fascinated about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think we lost it a little bit in this world of everything is accessible all the time.
Mm.
Um, so that the consumism is always there. You can get anything. So you
Yeah.
you might lose appreciation quickly, and I think that also can happen to your coffee if you see it as a caffeine fix in the morning. It's like, whatever coffee, just give me that kick so I can wake up. There's so many products out there who do exactly that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then there is also that experience I repeatedly have going to a coffee shop, and you just mentioned that, where baristas take extra care, where the machines are dialed in, where the great coffee is available. And that experience is something else. It really connects me to the world, connects me to life, connects me to myself, connects me to other people. It's so much more than just a fix getting my heart rate going. And I think that's the difference to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where all that great care, and that's where data also comes in. So a lot of those steps are hard to do. We know that. So it's um but we can make it easier, and we can make it more repeatable. We can make it more fun. To me, it's also fun, right?
Hmm.
Again, I go back to my accounting system. Sounds boring, and it might be for a lot of people. And but then when you look at the data, actually, it's very interesting. You can learn so much.
Yeah.
Entering the data, yes, it's boring. Getting the data out there, looking at the reports, looking at a timeline, looking at how you have developed or not, where opportunities are, that is exciting. And I think that's the
Absolutely.
same for coffee, right? So you
Yeah.
get the coffee in, and then know how to dial it in better, make it
Yeah.
a little bit more, I don't know, sweeter, a little bit more acidic, whatever you need, right?
Yeah. 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 That's true. 100%.
So I mean, I'm always excited about data, because
Yeah.
again, once the data is in the format, and you can query it, and you can look at patterns, and you can look at can try, can learn something from it,
Yeah.
and that is wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. So let me pose this to you to kind of finish it off. Right now, I would say there's still somewhat of an imbalance of like power in the industry, and I don't know if that'll ever change or what we can do on our end to change that. But in your opinion, like, do you think that at minimum, improving the knowledge around the importance of data collection at origin for producers can be a step forward in terms of empowering the producer and being more of an actor, like being more of an empowered actor in the supply chain?
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, that is the function of being able to access and learn from data, because you can prepare yourself better, you can learn more, you know more about yourself and your business. So depend less on someone else telling you what is going on or what they think is going on, or just throw out a number and value what they think the value should be. Right. So the more data and the more information you have, you can then, as you say, be a proactive partner and bring that to the table, and negotiate, communicate on a very different level.
Yeah. Sick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what, look at it like the internet or access to information, access to smartphones, all that helped people to learn a little bit more, empower themselves a little bit more. Yes, there is also some dark sides and abuse, and like there's always someone who tries to influence other people, but ultimately having access and having options allows you to participate. So I'm very excited about that, and all those learning programs, as again with what's going on at Origin. Also some of the roasters do fantastic work, traders, all of them, to help having partners at the table and not just producers out there who nobody sees or cares.
Yeah. No, for sure. Awesome. That was dope.
Yeah. So
Thanks,
I think
Norbert.
we should keep going with Cropster and help help on that aspect.
100%. Totally with you there.
Awesome. Yeah, me too.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Coffee and Technology Podcast. To learn more about Cropster, subscribe to this podcast and follow us on social media. For more educational content, visit cropster.com/learn.